Well, here I am, my feet flam as I escape.
Hey, Nick here from Island Recording Studios. In this tutorial, we're going to help you decide which guitar amp to record with in the studio. To start with, let's look at tube amps. Now, tube amps are pretty old technology. They've been around for decades, but there's a reason for that. They sound great. They're very popular for studio applications as well as live. And even though they are quite heavy and cumbersome to carry around in a lot of cases, and also quite expensive in some cases, they're used in studios all over the world. We've got a Vox AC4 here in the studio, and that's a really classic tube amp design that hasn't changed really in decades. Let's have a listen to how it sounds. So as you can hear, there's a lot of really nice presence in the sound, a bit crunchy as well, which is another good thing about tube amps. They break up really, really naturally, and you get that really nice natural distortion in the tone. And if you want an overdriven sound, a tube amp is a really nice way to get it, because in a lot of cases, it's what most of the pedals out there are actually trying to emulate. Let's hear what it sounds like when you crank it up a bit more. So as you can hear, that's got a lot of really cool attitude to the sound, and that's the hallmark of a cranked up tube amp. Now, solid state amps. These are a lot simpler, a lot cheaper, a lot lighter than tube amps. They're much newer technology. It's almost like sort of digital versus analog technology, you know. It's a much simpler method of producing the sound without going into too much technical detail, which you can read more about in the blog that accompanies this tutorial. But basically, solid state amps are really good for a pristine, clean tone. So a lot of jazz players use them to get a really clear sound. If you crank them up, they sound pretty much exactly the same. There's no real breakup like a tube amp. The only difference is the tone, in a lot of cases, is a little bit sharper and harsher than you get with a tube amp. It doesn't quite have that same warmth. Let's check it out. So it sounds nice and clear at low volumes. You know, with tube amps, you kind of have to get it in this sweet spot, turning the volume knob up a little bit to sort of get it to work. Solid state amps, you just get the tone that you're going to get right from the start, all the way up to sort of 10 on the volume knob. But you could probably hear that they had that extra little bit of sharpness to it. So you just want to consider whether that's really going to be suitable for the style of music you're playing. In most cases, I would go with a tube amp for that warmth. As I said, they're popular for a reason. But again, you might have an application for a solid state amp, you know, if you really want that super crisp clarity and cleanliness. And they help keep your back in good condition too. Next up, we're going to talk more about those applications for different amps. And if you've got a song that's got clean parts and dirty parts on it, why not use a clean amp and a dirty amp separately to get the sounds you want on that track? For your clean parts, aim for an amp that's really designed to be clean. You know, that might be a solid state amp, or in tube world, a classic is the Fender Twin Reverb, which we have over here. Let's hear how that sounds. So you can really hear that's got a really nice, fat, juicy, clean sound going on. And that's perfect for the clean parts on your record. Now, just as the Twin Reverb is designed to be a really clean amp, the Vox AC4 here is designed to break up really, really easily and at low volumes. So when you crank it, you don't have to blow your ears off to get a really, really nice distorted sound. And if you've got distorted or overdriven parts that you want to track on your record, it's a really great choice to lay those down. So let's check it out. So that's a really nice, natural, aggressive distortion sound that tube amps are famous for. So consider which parts you're recording on a song and think about which different amps you might be able to switch between to achieve the tones you're after. Instead of using your pedal board, if you've got access to a few different amps, why not get the great tone straight from the source? However, you can also get tube amps that can switch between clean and distortion at the flick of a button. One of those is the Fender Blues Deluxe we have at Island Studios here, and so you can use it for your clean track. And then when it's time to dirty it up a little bit, hit the button and off you go. So that's really driving the tubes right there in the amp itself, and you're getting that lovely broken up distorted sound with a master volume to help you keep it all under control. A good option that gives you the best of both worlds all in one package. Next, we're going to look at how to use the control panel on your amp to dial in the perfect tone using this Fender Blues Deluxe here we've got at the studio. So here we've got the volume control, and we're actually going to go to that last because you want to get the tone right before you work with your studio engineer or your own ears to get the level right. So let's move over to the treble control here. We're playing with a Fender Telecaster here, which is a relatively jangly and bright guitar, so you probably don't want to add too much treble in there. You know, that's pretty nice and spanky. But what we might do is we might actually add in a little bit of bass and mids. If we turn those up a little bit, we've got like a nicer, fatter sound for, you know, maybe a rhythm part that we're playing. And that's going to sound even nicer if we go to the neck pickup on the guitar. So yeah, that's really nice, really warm sounding. And the thing to remember here is you don't want to take stuff out too much. We can turn the knobs up and add EQ control in. We can turn the controls up to add mids and bass like we have here. But if you go the other way around and you're turning bass down, cutting the mids out, your engineer can't really add that back in later. It's gone. You don't really have that frequency information there. If you try to add it in, it's going to sound really nasty. So just remember not to take things out too much. So we've got our really juicy rhythm sound here. Over here, we've got reverb control. Now, I'm actually going to turn that down to 0. I think it's safer in the studio to add that later. You might record the perfect take, but you've had lots of reverb on there and then it's ruined and you don't like the sound. So if you keep it on 0, you're just focusing on the fundamental tone of the guitar, and then you can add that as an effect creatively to your taste later on when you're mixing the song. Presence control. This is a fairly subtle but effective tone shaping control. If we've got it down pretty low, it's going to dull the tone a little bit. If we turn it all the way up, we're going to get a bit more brightness in the sound, but it's a bit different to moving the treble control up and down. It gives you a little bit of a different effect. You might like it, you might not. Experiment with it a bit. It might come across a bit harsh, depending on the sort of tone you're working with. If in doubt, that's another one I think, a bit like the reverb, just cut it out and focus on using the basic EQ band controls over here to get the sound you want. And now we've got the tone we want. We can decide how loud we want it. So you use your volume control and work with what's going into the microphone and into your recording setup to figure out what the optimal volume is. Oh, and we've also got a bright switch over here. So normal or bright is, as the name suggests, going to brighten your sound if you put it in. Versus taking it out. It probably doesn't matter either way, to be honest. You know, if you decide you want the sound brighter later on, then you can do that in the mixing phase. Same the other way around. So just go with whatever you think sounds nicer on the day when you give it a bit of a sound check. So no matter what pedals or other trickery you've got going on, just remember the secret to fundamentally good tone starts right here on this control panel of your amp. For part 4 of this tutorial, we're going to look at the other important part of an amplifier, which is the speaker. A general assumption you might have is that if you've got a really, really big amp, you're going to get a really, really big sound. And that's definitely true on stage at a gig. You know, you can actually feel like the size of the sound coming out of a big Marshall stack or whatever it might be. But in the studio, you don't necessarily get quite the same effect. Here we have an orange Rockaverb 50, which is quite big. It's got 2 12-inch speakers in it. You can also get these cabinets with 4 speakers in them. So it's big, and if you somehow forget where you put it, it's brightly orange colored as well, so you can find it easily. Here's how it sounds. So that might be great for projecting sound live on a stage, but here in the studio, I've just plugged into this little Vox AC4 here. So as you can see, the Vox is physically smaller, but as you can hear, it's not that much smaller. And a lot of famous guitar parts, guitar solos have been recorded with very small amps. Like there's a lot of classic Led Zeppelin tunes that were recorded with a Fender Champ, which is about the same size, in fact, even a little bit smaller than that. And finally, tip number 5 is about combining 2 amps together. Now, we've talked a lot about amps having different characters. You know, some are built to be clean, some are built to be distorted and dirty and break up easily. Now, we've talked a lot about amps having different characters. You know, some are built to be clean, some are built to be distorted and dirty and break up easily. And you can use them in different parts of a song, as we've discussed. A clean amp for clean sections, a nice tube breakup tone for the dirty sections of the song. But another cool thing you can do is take 2 amps of different characters and blend them together at the same time to get one really nice tone. Here we have the Twin Reverb, which is really clean, really big and fat sounding, and the Vox AC4, which is quite aggressive and bitey and breaks up nice and easy. And we've got them running at the same time, so let's have a listen to how that sounds. So with that bit of aimless noodling, you can see that we've got the beefiness of the Twin, the bitiness of the Vox, and together they create, and that's just a really good fundamental tone that you can use as a rhythm track, you know, maybe for some lead a little bit, you know, some overdubs, some arpeggios, whatever it might be. And you just get a unique sound that you wouldn't have got from one of those amps on their own. Mic placement matters when you're recording guitar amps. And as a bonus tip, if you're doing this guitar recording at home by yourself, I'm going to leave you with a demonstration of how mic placement affects your recorded guitar tone to help you decide where to put it.